Blizzard does not understand survivorship bias. The 250,000 views posted 1 month ago. Okay, wait. Overwatch's balance is heavily driven by data, and if Blizzard knew how to analyze its data and avoid common bias, that wouldn't be a huge issue. Unfortunately, they're tripping over the lowest possible bars, and it makes the game worse. Okay, wait. This is a lot. Okay, before we even get into this video, I will say that, like, you gotta have a pretty high opinion of yourself to talk data when data people at Blizzard, how do you know? How do you actually know? Right? I'm sitting there question marking, like, wait, give the video a fair chance. It's one of these that, like, I'm going in with with an extremely question mark type of idea, you know, because typically game devs have people on their teams specifically for data. They have a ton of education on this stuff. They go all in.
It is not a hot take to argue that Blizzard's balance team is bad at their job.
It's opening strong.
They make incoherent decisions on a pretty consistent basis. They refuse to address major problems even when the community is in pretty near
Okay. Let's go.
consensus over them, and they take way too long to implement new balance changes, although hopefully that's changing soon. The rare times that this game
You speak so quiet.
has been in a state of relatively good health, such as the initial launch of Overwatch 2 in my opinion, are very much so the exception rather than the rule, and I think a big part of that is that Blizzard does not understand this concept of survivorship bias. This became especially obvious to me after a Twitter interaction that Alec Dawson, the lead hero designer on Overwatch 2, had with a player who said, regarding Mercy, it was mentioned that she was way high up there in high ranks. How is this determined? From my experience, the only players playing Mercy at higher ranks are those that specialize her. Anyone else would choose any other support than Mercy. Alec's response was, we look at win rate, then see if there's a significant enough dataset for the hero in that rank range, pick rate, and then try to dig into the details of a match itself. Would love to touch on data more in the future. In the highest ranks, Mercy is top 3 in win rate and pick rate.
I did not know that she was top 3 in win rate and pick rate.
And this made me want to talk about survivorship bias because it's clear that Blizzard genuinely doesn't understand the concept, and it is making the game worse. I also think the player base suffers from this issue to some extent too, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So to start with, let's define the term. What is survivorship bias? It's actually
First off, before we hop in, I just want to say that responses like these to quick developer tweets are very commonly why they don't talk. Okay, and so the moment that, dude, he dives in on this one tiny tweet, I'm like, oh fuck, here we go. I'm ready for a ride, dude.
pretty straightforward concept in data analysis, best demonstrated with an example. It's the idea that when evaluating data from a given situation, you are always going to be biased towards survivors, even though the data from anyone who did not survive, either metaphorically or literally, is essential for coming to usable conclusions. The classic example is from World War II, where a statistician named Abraham Wald was part of a team analyzing how to make Allied bombers more survivable. They were able to examine the damage on planes that had successfully returned to base, and with that information, did something that seemed counterintuitive. Instead of suggesting reinforcing the areas of the bombers which had sustained damage, they wanted to reinforce the areas that had consistently taken little to no damage. Why? Because, even though the data would seem to indicate that the damaged areas were the areas in need of reinforcement, the reality was the opposite. It proved that bombers taking damage in those areas were still able to safely return to base. But, if no planes that successfully returned had taken damage in other areas, you could logically conclude that it's because being shot in those areas would result in fatal damage, meaning that that's where you want to install reinforcements. This is a really important concept in data analysis, and given that Blizzard openly prioritizes raw data over anything else when determining balance decisions, it's especially important that they factor it into their decision making, and they obviously don't.
How do you know that? Okay. Huh?
Next, let's move on to what survivorship bias actually looks like in Overwatch. In the Overwatch context, let's look at the comment that Alec made again. Mercy is top 3 in pick rate and win rate at the highest ranks. There's an element to this that's going unstated. Who's filling the 2 top spots? Alec implies in the replies that this is specifically talking about supports, not the entire roster, so it's a safe bet to assume that the top 2 for pick rate are Kiriko and Lucio, 2 heroes who have just dominated Season 1 meta of Overwatch 2. Survivorship bias is actually, perhaps unintentionally, being invoked in SkyC's original tweet. From my experience, the only people playing Mercy at higher ranks are those that specialize her. Anyone else would choose any other support than Mercy. The argument is that when it comes to any off-meta hero, the only people who will play that hero still will be specialists who are doing a risk-reward analysis and determining that even though, say, Kiriko and Lucio are the meta heroes who bring the highest baseline potential to their team, their skill with Mercy is high enough that it's the better decision.
No. He is so far gone already. All right, dude. This applies to every character. People are not rational in top 500, dude. People just pick whatever their favorite character is and they just get out of voice and they don't care. Like, it's not even it's their skill with other ones that are too low. Yeah, a lot of the time that's also true, particularly for Mercy mains. There's a very specific thing where Mercy mains are very often not as skilled with other characters because the skills on Mercy don't easily transfer to other characters. So it's harder for them to play multiple characters at once. So let's keep going. But, and I just want to talk, like, just before we keep going though, just, I'm still waiting because he's really reaching off of one dev tweet that isn't even like a data person talking about or anything else. And there's people on dev teams that specifically are data people who dive into stuff. Right. And so it's interesting that he's taking like a tweet from one person casually commenting, but they aren't the data person making like a big, huge thing.
This is in contrast to the actual meta heroes, who are going to tend to be played by most people. That's because they're the meta, which means that they're going to be played by people with a wider, more general skill range. After all, if you're a support player who's a jack of all trades but a master of none, you're more likely to play the meta, because even though you
Is he talking about how one tricks have higher win rates?
bring roughly equivalent value regardless of which support you're playing, that higher baseline for the meta heroes makes them just a more attractive option. Far more people in Overwatch are generalists to some extent than outright specialists, in part because it's really hard to get so good with a hero that it justifies picking them over heroes who on paper just have more to offer. Not only will it be primarily specialists playing off meta, but pretty good ones. In Season 1, you had to be real good at Mercy to play at higher ranks and still get more value than you would have out of either Kiriko or Lucio. Because of this, only the best of the best Mercies will still be playing her at high ranks, and therefore
This guy makes a lot of assumptions. He makes so many assumptions. Before we even dive into anything, he's just saying stuff.
she's going to have a disproportionately high win rate compared to heroes who are either one, on meta, since they're being played by everybody and therefore are going to have a more averaged out win rate, or two, heroes where the skill ceiling is too low for a specialist to be able to compensate for how much more value they could get out of other heroes. The survivorship bias in this scenario comes from Alec failing to recognize that there are a huge amount of people who are never picking Mercy because she wasn't in a good place in the game. He's only looking at people who are picking her, which is only looking at the best of the best Mercies at any given skill rank. This isn't an accurate representation of where Mercy is in the game. This isn't seeing how the average player is able to use her. This is automatically filtering for only the best Mercies, only the people who are willing to stick with her through her being weak.
Question. Did his tweet not say that Mercy was a top 3 pick? Yeah, you guys are all saying it too. Top 3 pick rate Mercy, right? Which means it isn't just a situation where a one trick is amping up the win rates of a low population character. This is specifically one of the most popular characters in the entire game, right? But she wasn't before Overwatch 2. You don't know that, right? You do not, like, we do not have the data to know these things. That's why it's so interesting to talk about this, because it's, let's keep going.
This is especially true because he's only talking about the highest skill ranks, which is just doubling up on the survivorship bias because you're looking at the best of the best people with this hero playing at the best of the best ranks. You are only looking at people who have succeeded under the current meta, not anyone who has failed. And we tend to see this kind of thing manifest in disproportionately strong nerfs against heroes like Genji or Sombra in Season 1, who were not the meta and were not actually big issues with Season 1's gameplay. And this is also where the community's survivorship bias comes in. Yes, Sombra could be pretty strong in the first half of Season 1, but really only in the hands of people who specialized her, at least to some extent. Bad Sombras were truly useless before the nerfs, and were often only picked because people erroneously thought she was easier than she was.
Sombra's pretty
As you went
bad.
to higher ranks, those bad Sombra specialists got filtered out, and you were only left with the people who were genuinely good with her, which made her look really strong whenever she was played, and gave the community the impression she was overpowered. This lined up with Blizzard's data about pick rates and win rates, which again failed to account for all the people who didn't play her.
This is such a reach.
She's a challenging hero who's hard to get real utility out of, and so they nerfed her. Now she's pretty useless. And some of you, I see you on Twitter, I see you on Reddit, and I see you on YouTube, are still cheering on those nerfs even as you cry about the consequences that have been reaped. And this is where we get into the third section of this video, the consequences of ignoring survivorship bias.
Oh god.
As of time
He
of recording,
sees you!
the dominant tanks in the meta are Roadhog and Doomfist. Ramatra seems to be kind of finding his place, depending on who you ask. The pros kind of have their own strats with him, whatever.
This is a month old, by the way, so
like
it's a little bit
normal players.
It'll be hog
Doomfist
meta
had some
probably.
pretty major buffs coming into season 2. Roadhog really hasn't gotten a balance change since Overwatch 2 launch, at least not to him. So how do we explain him going from being treated as like a borderline throw pick to being the main meta tank?
Kiriko got added to the game, which counters all his counters.
A pretty big part of that answer is those Sombra nerfs for both tanks. Sombra has always been good at holding down both Hog and Doomfist. They are obviously very reliant on their abilities.
I guess you could argue it.
Survivability, and Sombra was a solid counter to that. Doomfist wasn't meta in season 1 because he wasn't very strong, but one reason why Hog wasn't was that a Roadhog running into a pre-nerf Sombra alongside a Reaper or a Sojourn was not gonna have a fun time. The existence
I guess
of
you
a
can
Sombra on the
you can argue it, but I feel like the much bigger one is the fact that a new character got added to the game, which specifically removes all of those problems with Hog. It is slightly true, but I really don't think it's on the same level. You know what I mean? Because Sombra, as we know, usually isn't a very popular character anyway.
field meant that Roadhog
So let's
players
keep going.
could still survive and thrive, but only good ones. It's like how the existence of a Widowmaker on the field makes most Pharahs swap off, and the ones who succeed in spite of Widow are going to be the ones who know how to play their angles, keep themselves safe, and work with their team to undermine the advantage that Widow naturally has over a Pharah. On top of that, you might look at Ana, another hero who isn't really doing great in the current meta. She's theoretically a solid support choice against a Roadhog, but whoops, Kiriko's in the meta, and she can remove the sleep darts and anti-healing that an Ana would use to punish a Roadhog who is too aggressive, so that won't work. Reaper is good against Hog, but it's still definitely possible for a Roadhog to win a duel with a Reaper. Certainly easier than like for a Winston to win that duel, especially now that Mercy is starting to become more essential to the meta in order to damage boost the still meta Sojourn, who needs Mercy for her right clicks to still be a one-hit kill on 200 HP targets. And don't forget, most CC abilities have been removed from the rest of the non-tank roster, with Sombra and Ana both pretty non-viable in the face of nerfs and the impact of more meta heroes.
Still non-viable in the face of nerfs. I still find this so interesting, by the way, because this is a guy who's talking about survivorship bias and data and stats a lot. How do you know Ana's win rate? You could argue, I guess, Sojourn is terrible. Or maybe they've come out and said specifically, so maybe they've come out, or sorry, not Sojourn, Sombra. Maybe they come out specifically and argued that Sombra is not good or something, right? I don't, have they said anything about Ana? He's not really talking about stats a lot? I don't know.
Is there a solution to Roadhog meta? People are complaining right now that supports in Season 2 are the punching bags of the game, and they're absolutely right. It's not fun to play them. Almost like we've nerfed every hero who could punish a Doomfist or a Roadhog who barges into the backline into non-viability. And I will say, on a personal level, it is
This was a month ago, by the way, Chad. Just a reminder. This was a month
particularly
ago.
galling as a Sombra main to watch my hero get nerfed completely out of viability.
Oh, so now I get it, dude. That's why your icon in the bottom left is a Sombra icon. This, there it is, dude. Okay. Oh, I did it. Oh, now I'm getting it.
Demanded those nerfs, crying out
Okay.
hard, and Doom. I called this in the video I made about it. You are reaping what you have sowed. If Sombra
Finally.
hadn't been nerfed, she would still be an option to keep this game's balance in check.
It's all about the fact that you nerf Sombra, my main, and Hog is running wild. And if you didn't nerf Sombra, I could help keep the Hogs in check. Finally, it took 8 minutes to get there. In between, Blizzard doesn't expect survivorship bias, but
If Ana had been buffed in recognition of the power vacuum that was being left for Hog and Doom to step into, we could have avoided this. If Blizzard was willing to do what's actually necessary and implement some real goddamn nerfs to Sojourn, the meta might not have become what it is. But again, survivorship bias. The only people who are still playing Ana are the best Anas at their skill rank. Of course, the data would reflect that she's got a decent win rate and performance if you exclude all the people who wouldn't dare to play her because you need to be really good for her not to be a throw pick over Lucio or Kiriko. The only people who are playing Sombra and seeing real
how does he know how Ana's pick rate is? How does he know any of this? Like, wait, that's what I mean. That's what I mean by he's reaching here. Because you don't have the data to make these statements. You don't know. Usually, Mercy is one of the most picked characters in any rank in the game. Stuff like that is, yeah. He hasn't mentioned any. Blizzard Blog sometimes did it. Blizzard Blog did it a couple times a long, long time ago. But I feel like you can't call out a company for having bias in the way they do data while simultaneously not having any data to prove it. You're just kind of just saying stuff. It doesn't make sense.
For the people who were good with her. And it is baffling to me that half a decade after this game initially came out, we are still arguing about whether or not it's acceptable for people who are high skilled to get high value out of a hero when they've put in the time to be good with them. I feel like I'm losing my mind that this is still a debate that we're having. The only people playing Mercy in Season 1 were the people who were good with her. Ana and Mercy are not in a good place right now, even though Mercy is starting to enter the meta because she needs to pocket Sojourn. And remember, just because a hero is meta does not mean that they are fun for the people who are playing them. I was there for Moth meta. I was usually the Moth, never again. This collection of decisions.
How old is this? This is 1 month old. 1 month old, chat. So this would have been around the time that Mercy was, people were starting to pick a lot more Mercy. I mean, that was happening even the middle end of Season 1, I think. Pre-Orisa buffs. It was right before Orisa buffs, I think. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in this video.
Of, nerfing Sombra, refusing to accommodate with some sort of a buff to Ana or a nerf to Kirik or anything to make this meta seem less stacked in favor of building up Roadhog and Doomfist to the positions that they're at, comes down to a failure to recognize and account for survivorship bias. And it's why
putting it all on survivorship bias is such an interesting, weird take of it, because realistically, the reason I feel like Sombra got nerfed into the ground had nothing to do with, old Sombra wasn't picked that often. The people were just popping off really hard, so we nerfed her, blah, blah. It usually just came down to, like, she's just not fun to play against. And so they're not really nerfing based off of necessarily win rate, but also are players having fun in some cases. And so I can't help but feel like they want to redesign Sombra to be fun for everyone, and they didn't really get Sombra to where they want her to be. And I think that's also the case for Doomfists and also Hog to an extent. Like, if you guys notice that all the characters that they nerf into the ground really, really fast are the ones that are really unfun to play against immediately. And then usually, as long as that applies to lower ranks as well, being perma-hacked on tank was a very non-enjoyable experience. Yeah, but it also made it awkward for Sombra players. He made a video about Sombra? I guess, but I'm just trying to get to the, the big picture here is, and I think this is something really interesting I heard from an Apex developer once, probably about 3 years ago. It was something along the lines of, the goal of patching isn't to make like win rates 50%. It's to make the game more fun, right? And that was a really, really interesting way and very true way of saying, you want to make things relatively balanced, but if stuff is balanced and it's unfun, you still want to change it, right? And some people always have standard expectations of fun, right? So like in a game such as Valorant and Counter-Strike, people aren't going to sit there and be saying things like, yeah, we need to nerf rifles. Pistols and shotguns aren't good enough. Or, hey, we need to nerf the op. It's just kind of overpowered to get one tapped. So like, that's just not a thing. That's not a discussion that really actively happens in those communities, because there's a very common accepted standard, right? So it's always interesting when we double back and come back to Overwatch, though. The op did get nerfed, though. Okay, listen. I know they nerfed the ammo on it, right? Well, didn't they? Okay. Counter-Strike op, did they not nerf the ammo so that way specifically it was easier to push sites or something? So that way you were punished for missing. They didn't nerf the one shot though, and that's a nuanced take and this and that. Whatever. Let's keep going. Let's keep going down the line. All right, let's keep going down. I know what you guys are talking about, but when it comes to Overwatch, I think, man, it just feels so egotistical in a way to imply that Blizzard doesn't understand an inherent bias when you yourself don't have the data and they have legitimately data scientists and everybody there who are working on that type of thing. And it's like, you don't have access to make that statement. And it really just comes off as, I am salty that my main character got nerfed.
Why the game is not only worse now than it was 2 months ago, it's why the game is only going to continue getting worse. Balance is not just something that can be determined by raw data, especially if you refuse to actually do real data analysis.
See? That's what I'm talking about. It's like, dude,
you can't just look at raw data. That's not how you come to reasonable conclusions.
See, I swear a lot of people do this in these videos we've been watching today. It's okay to say that you don't want to do balance off of pure data. That's fine. That's like a normal thing. Like, yeah, you don't want to like
here to recognize and account for survivorship bias. And it's why the game is not only worse now than it was 2 months ago. It's why the game is only going to continue getting worse. Balance is not just something that can be determined by raw data.
If you stop there, you're fine.
Especially if you refuse to actually do real data analysis.
But then you're just insulting people who are smarter than you.
You can't
It
just
doesn't
look at
work.
raw data. That's not how you come to reasonable conclusions. Data has to be interpreted, and when Blizzard refuses to account for survivorship bias, it makes the data unusable for the purposes of making this game balanced and fun. And I don't understand how they're this bad at this. This game is not new. Anyways,
God damn.
for now, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this,
If I was a data scientist, like person at Blizzard listening to this, I would hate you.
make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you'd like to see some more of my videos from me, YouTube is about to recommend one for you in the top left. But if you'd like my recommendation, I'd suggest checking out the video I did on Overwatch's failure to expand its universe compared to franchises like League of Legends, Cyberpunk, and Danganronpa.
Oh boy. Oh yeah, there's a lot. Anyway. Yeah, this schedule uploaded before the hotfix dropped. Oh, okay. Imagine if the top mercies formed an agreement to perform terribly this season to get the balanced team's attention. LOL. I've been hearing from bigger Overwatch YouTubers that balancing off win rates is bad, but never fully delve into why it's bad, or they don't give a good explanation on why it's bad. Your video is the first I've seen get a satisfactory answer as to why balancing off raw data is shit. Oh no. See? These videos are spooky, man. When a video is only played by a specialist, it's a sign that something is very wrong. Either a hero is so weak that only specialists getting real value, or their fun factor has been badly damaged by terrible balancing / design rework design that no one's left playing, or specialists who are unable to willing to go play another character. Okay. What I mean, this thing here, bouncing off win rates is a whole topic that I could dive into for a long time, but it's not because of survivorship bias and this and that. It's because you want to optimize the game for fun. And fun is a different topic. Things can be overpowered, but enjoyable to play with and against because there's like good counterplay. It's an enjoyable experience. You're not getting chain CC'd, you know, stuff like that. And fun is like a catch-all here that isn't a very good word for what I'm trying to describe. But an example is, I don't find tanks to be particularly fun to play because a lot of the time tanks are playing counterpick, rock, paper, scissors too often, where they run back to spawn, they swap, and their full version of playing the game is I go there and we shoot each other, we do it, and then they went back to spawn, they swap, so now I have to swap, and there's no interesting gameplay interactions that come down to it because so often they have to go back. So much the answer is not how do I play against this better, it's well, now I just need to swap because they hard counter me. You know what I mean? And so I can understand where this player comes from and raging a lot about this, though, because this player mains a character that everyone in the game hates, which is Sombra. So unfortunately, because Blizzard doesn't necessarily do things based off of win rate strictly, playing against your character is a miserable experience for everyone else in the game. That's why your character gets nerfed into the ground more often and is not viable compared to many others. Even though, again, you're going to blame like their data is wrong. Their data isn't wrong, probably. They just maybe think that your character is dumb and they needs to be reworked a little bit. But when it comes to, I feel like I have to also give this other context to this point is I played Genji for like 3 or 4 years or something stupid. I got popular being the Poggers Genji guy on launch, right? I've accepted for a long time now where, you know, Genji will not be super meta at a high end because I think if he's really meta for people who can really aim at people who are double jumping and going all over the place, that means for a lower level player, he's probably too powerful and therefore they have to nerf him for the health of the overall game. And so I stopped playing Genji for a really long time, even though I do think he's actually pretty good right now. I don't think he's actually as bad as people think. He's definitely not amazing or anything. He's just, I don't find him super enjoyable in the way I have to play him. And so I haven't played him in many, many years because of that. But I feel a little bit, I guess, of relation there of like, you know, the Sombra player feels that way at a high rank. The Genji player at a high rank also usually feels that way because Genji mains at high MMR kind of think he just doesn't feel great or he just kind of sucks. Most of them, they don't seem to be having a great time most of the time. But yeah, I think there's there's something more interesting here in the middle. 250,000 views, by the way. Yeah, I mean, videos like this, they do pretty well. You can put out, honestly, like, yeah, I mean, it's YouTube, man. Like, if it resonates with people, they like it. It's that easy. Just because you study data science does not make you smarter than anyone or indicate they have any clue how to balance the game or your suggestions will be good. It is way more likely you will give terrible suggestions will be implemented because you only have knowledge of a specific field and don't understand the game overall. Okay, but That doesn't have to do with anything here. Just because people doing data don't understand a game doesn't mean the data is bad. What you're criticizing is the game designer person, or like the person balancing the game, not the person getting the data. And then also here, it doesn't mean you can just say random BS online and it means something. You know what I mean? Like the dude who's giving the data and like running all the numbers on specific stuff or whatever is probably not the person who's in charge of being like, yeah, Genji -2 damage now. And then also saying that it all comes down to survivorship bias because you don't think people are smart or whatever. There's always this like really weird, there's always the fine line between being elitists or not. And I think in a lot of these cases, like the elitism is actually warranted. Like as a video game player on the internet, I don't fucking know data science. So why are we talking about this?